Awesome. So, Ariel, we are Twitter pals, and we're going to talk today about the King of Wands. And in the Rust Belt Arcana deck, the King of Wands is it's a card that has black walnut on it, which is the tree species, and it is also the character that it's based on in the card. The drawing is Joseph Campbell. So I'd be curious, kind of, why did we pick that card to talk about, and or why did you pick that card as something you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so it was kind of a winding path, wasn't it? Trying to figure out what card to talk about. And then the last few weeks, I mean, okay, first off, the Rust Belt Tarot deck is incredible. And I swear, like, it messes with me and it's sarcastic and it gets me in a very interesting way. But I was focusing on very deep study for a couple years now, and Joseph Campbell's like major influential on me for a long time. Like his take on the hero's journey, and I mean, the man could just open his mouth and talk about the weather, and we will have bumper stickers. Like it's incredible. And I get bogged down by all this noise of social media and the books I'm reading, and I make these super quick connections of things that are a little bit out there, and then I listen too much to everything around me and I lose my own voice. And I started doing daily polls and other spreads, and the deck literally would throw the King of Wands card out at me. Just one single solitary card flying out of the deck at myself. And every week was the King of Wands, every single time. So, yeah.
That is very cool. So, what does that card kind of signify from your experience reading cards? Do you use fixed meanings, or do you use it more context? Like, what's your reading style like?
So it's new. I started off with like the Toth and Hermetic stuff. And while I understood why it had those symbols, it didn't resonate at all. Um, and I live outside. So Rust Belt was like, and I know a lot of those species from all the places I've lived. So I was like, I need that one. And it's just, I started learning through Diana Rose Harper and doing one card polls, and only a few 6 months to a year ago. So I'll look up some of the traditional like Rider Waite definitions after I sit with it for a while and see if the connections like make sense. Um, and it wasn't working until I really found this deck, because there's something about the connection between humans and the natural world that for me make the symbols make sense. Um, so it's only been maybe 3 or 4 months that I'll see a card and I'll know more intuitively, and then I like check myself. And it typically works pretty well now. Yeah.
That is a cool process. I like that idea of having your own intuitive understanding first, and then coming to the fixed meanings later. It seems like it's usually the other way around. It was kind of for me when we were building it. It was, get the fixed meanings. It was interesting, actually. I'd look up the fixed meanings, and then it would kind of jump out at me that the species or the aspect of something would jump out like in front of me, which was kind of cool. Kind of build itself.
Yeah, well, that makes sense why it resonates with me, because I was trying to learn so traditionally, and then I found Rust Belt, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. Yeah. So thank
That's
you.
cool. I'm glad. I'm really glad. It seems like embodying it in the landscape, or embedding it, the structure in the landscape, was a way to be closer to it. So you're not just taking it like reading kind of dusty, or even kind of, what was it? Jason described it as listening to scripture in church. It just didn't resonate because it felt like it was just somebody reciting something. It wasn't a lived experience. So that's super cool. I One of the things I guess I was curious about is when you see the King of Wands, then let's talk about it there from a divinatory standpoint. We picked it as because it kept coming up, but what does it mean for you in a reading? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I have notes. I have like multiple notebooks because I'm silly. But no, yeah. So um for me, the King of Wands is like this charismatic leader that can bring like his vision into the real world and like bridge it and can inspire other people to do the same to for his particular vision. So it can be a bit abrupt, demanding, but also can work within other people's way of thinking of things in order to get the end goal met. Kind of like a bridge between the vision and what he wants and the way people understand it so that it can happen. Um, and that resonates deeply with me in general because that I do that. I've got so many lived experiences. I like to say I've lived many lives, and I'm always this bridge between so many different like social pockets.
But one of the reasons that we picked the walnut was that thing you said about how that walnut really directs the direction, or it influences the direction of everything around it with some of the chemicals that it produces under its canopy, its system. It really influences what can grow and what can't, and that's one of the main reasons we picked it. It's this very sturdy and important tree, and it's this uh, just really an impressive specimen, and it has all these amazing attributes, but it's also potentially limiting and controlling in some ways that are kind of challenging for others.
Here, they're everywhere, and they'll like dent your car. Like they're they just like plummet. And people love trees, so they don't like think about it when they, I guess, pave their driveways and stuff. And I live in the foothills of like true Appalachia, so there's this weird dichotomy of we're gonna respect the landscape, but then get mad at it. So yeah, there's like it's yeah, black walnuts everywhere.
That's cool. I was doing a last summer. We I did a I bought some herbalism books and was really chasing trying to kind of, it sounds weird, but eat my way through the landscape here and try to get embodied in it. And one of the things that came out of that was one of my favorite things was nocino. It's this Italian liquor, which is essentially uh, young walnuts that get chopped up and put in Everclear or some other grain alcohol. So we did that. I did that for a couple of years. It's just now kind of getting to where you might see them start maybe in another month. You could do it. And I might do that again. It's usually ready by 4th of July. And I'm just, blackout drunk somewhere on 4th of July on walnut liquor, which is not a great thing for me, but it's what happens.
Yeah, it's delicious. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've got some Italian family, and they introduced me to it. Well, I didn't try it, but I got to see them on it, kind of thing.
It's awesome. It's black. It's herbal. It's like this black liquid. It's super good. So one of the quotes on the card, well, the quote on the card, is about books and reading. And I'd just be curious, kind of. So you'd mentioned, there you go. You mentioned that yourself. So I've seen these, reams of notebooks, which look like my notebooks, which I'm wildly disorganized at this point. It's the idea of reading widely. I think I have to imagine that's how you wound up in tarot and astrology in the first place. Can you tell me that path? Like, how was it reading? What got you there?
So I have always had my nose in a book, and it's funny for somebody who's moved a lot. I'm not quite maybe it's why, but I'm not content in what's around me. So I use it to like travel, time travel, literally travel, all of that. That's how I used reading, especially when I was younger. And because we moved so often, my books were the one constant. So I typically don't rewatch movies. I typically just do one and all, but I have certain books that I will read over and over and over again to kind of keep me feeling comforted and some consistency. Yeah, so that's huge. And then I am always curious, like I'm always asking why, and not just why, but how. And I make a joke about how I worship at the altar of nuance. um, and I think it's because I'll read a text and it won't click all the way, so I've got to fill in the gap. So like that's how it starts. Like the variety of things, because I'm always trying to fill in the gaps. Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's cool. It's my process is with reading and writing is somewhat different. It's just kind of finding something someone else doesn't see or doesn't know is important, or finding that kind of turn where there's something important that's not being said or isn't noted. That's fascinating.
Well, I
Go
think
ahead.
more into academia has kind of honed in on that, like fill in the gaps, because you don't want to, if you're not like a hard scientist, you don't want to publish the same thing that's being published. You have to find that gap that's still there to fill. And I think that has really made me hone in on what's different. And then, yeah, and then there's imposter syndrome where I'm like, everybody's already doing it, so why should I?
I understand that too. Do you have other decks that you use? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I've got the Toth deck. Is that how you say it? I don't even know how to say it.
That sounds as good as any. It sounds better than Toth or Thoth.
Yeah, I've got German language background, so that like hits in when it's something I don't know how to pronounce. I'm like, Toast? I don't know. But I also have this everyday tarot. It's like purple and gold, and it was like at the cash register as I was checking out, and it's really beautiful. And it has this little guidebook that includes like reversals and stuff. And I almost never pull a reversal, so I don't really know much about that. But it was the first like, oh, that's a really pretty deck. I'm gonna get that one. And then it's pretty for like Instagram or whatever. But those are the three, and I don't collect them because I feel like it's supposed to find me, which is why Rust Belt has become the deck. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Reversals. I want to talk about that for a minute. So you don't pull very many reversals, and I wonder if it's because of the deck that you're using, and also Thoth is the same way. It's one of the things that we saw when we talked to folks about the deck, and I first started kind of reviewing, after we brought this thing out in the world and wanted to see, what people thought about it or how it worked, was that the eye on the back, it makes it so you can see whether or not you're dealing yourself reversal or not, whether it's upright or reverse, because it's a one-way card. It's not like a pattern or something that could go either way. You actually will see it. And and Toth's the same way. So it's a crucifix, I think, on the back of Toth that has, it's clearly in one direction. And I had kind of this apprehension of reversals, right? Like I wasn't, because I feel like that the definitions that you get from reversal is it's either a lesser or the opposite of what's being said. And it's like, well, that's a huge gap between those two things. And I found, like, when somebody pointed out to me that our deck was one of those ones where you could see from the back of the card, you can decide whether or not you're going to read reversal or not. I've gone, I do read them, but I also, when I go to, shuffle and bring out the cards, I decide in that first shuffle or that first moment before I deal the first one, do you want this to be reversed or not? And the answer for me is usually no. I want to know what is the first card, and I'll accept reversals and review reversals later, especially in context. They're so much easier to understand in a spread. But it helps me with that first card, which is always kind of, I want to say it's trepidation. It's a little bit of that, angst, not the blank page. So I want to get that one upright first. I want to at least see that one first, and I can decide that. And I think that doesn't feel like cheating to be able to decide that I want this first message upright. Has helped me a little bit. Like I can accept it as a second card.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I I typically do this thing where if I'm feeling really apprehensive, I'll ask the deck to be gentle and kind, and sometimes it is, and
Yeah.
other times it isn't. And that's the one time I got a reversal. Was like I was really apprehensive and ended up being a good reversal. So yeah, it was the tower upside down, and I was like, okay, I can work with this. And thank you for not bludgeoning me with the tower. Like,
Sure. It's one of the other things that's helped me with that idea of reversals is there's a guy named Eriel, which is he's on Twitter and a bunch of different places, but he's a magician with a lot of interesting ideas. He's out in Oregon, and he put out a set of dice recently called the Tethered Elements, and it's these 6-sided dice, and they have these really visceral images. They're kind of simple, but they're really fascinating. And they're the thing about them is they on one side is the meaning, and on the opposite side of the dice is its opposing meaning. And so you can see it like how they're connected, like how a reversal is connected. It feels very similar, and it's weird to have a kind of a random set of dice that I found on online, but it's really informed kind of also how I think about reversals when I'm reading for myself and for other people, is seeing that the opposite side of it is connected to it like a through line, the opposite side of a reading. And it's like, whoa, that's been super helpful for me.
That's astrological too, because if you look at the chart, the opposites are connected like that, and it helps so I like the idea of the dice, because the chart too, it's like for me in my brain it's a 3D representation, it's not just a flat disc. So yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. One of the things I like both about like the walnut and Joseph Campbell, like the seeping in of the walnut almost makes me think of like when he quotes about every morning you need to like go seep into yourself, basically. Like there's this quote about like just separate from the newspapers, like get yourself alone for a second. I'm trying to see, I think I have it pulled up. Yeah. So it's you must have a room or a certain hour or so a day where you don't know what was in the newspapers that morning. You don't know who your friends are, you don't know what you owe anybody, you don't know what anybody owes you. This is the place where you can simply experience and bring forth what you are and what you might be. This is the place of creative incubation. At first, you may find that nothing happens there, but if you have a sacred place and use it, something eventually will happen. So, like, the walnut is such a beautiful connection there. Yeah.
It's really, really good life/writing advice too. I like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually just started a social media blackout today.
I saw that.
Yeah, I have been on my phone too much, like way too much. And I have a 4-year-old too, and we just bought a piano, and there's all these things that we want to do and experience, and the weather's beautiful, and we live 5 minutes from Buffalo Mountain. Like, why am I on my phone? And then I know that when I'm experiencing multiple things, my creativity just starts going, and I'm making connections, and I have all these almost finished essays and almost finished pieces of writing. And I'm like, I need to buckle down, and I need to focus. And I did a whole spread on it. And I spent like a whole day and a half on this spread of purpose. And it was like, yeah, social media blackout. It's got to happen. Like, yeah.
That sounds great. I need to do that. I'm treading that line, right? Where it's helped me a ton. I'm not gonna say it's like a all negative thing. You know, I don't really feel that way about a lot of things, but it's definitely sucking my brain stem as much as it's like also like meeting people and things like that. So it's been, good in that way. Like, but it's too much. It's the fire hose,
Yeah,
when you're
exactly.
addictive.
And most of my experiences are wonderfully positive. Like it's almost like I just want to go and have coffee with my friends all the time and ignore the rest of it. Like that's more of what the feeling is.
Yeah. I should mention one thing about Joseph Campbell before I forget. It's one of the things that, so he and Carl Jung kind of share this for me, in that they are kind of inaccessible in like a very King of Wands father way. Like the best Joseph Campbell for me is basically where he's hasn't written it. It's Bill Moyers and him talking. That book and that video of those two having that conversation, just like, Carl Jung's kind of deep cuts. I'm just like, or the Red Book is like, I've, poured all over that thing. I put my face against it, trying to like get some meaning out of it. But it's like the places where Carl Jung makes sense to me are, in his introductions to things, like those easy, or where he's trying to just maybe distill or explain kind of at a side in a different way. Cause I feel like, that King of Wands can get in their own way with their intellect and their kind of way of being with the world that's hard to access. And that King of Wands character is hard for me to access. I have to go at an angle.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense from my experience too, because like I've learned to not broadcast on my degrees because it puts up this gigantic barrier of talking with people. And I'm really silly. And as soon as someone knows that I have all these degrees, they don't see that I'm like super playful and silly. It's like this thing that happens. I have the same experience. I have two other really big, yeah, I guess they are kind of king of wand figures. Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky have completely guided my political science stuff, and they're very much like that too. And Howard Zinn especially, it's the Q&A after the lecture that I'm like, I need to focus on that, and because the other stuff is like, yeah, same thing.
That's cool. That's very cool. Awesome. Ariel, this is so good. Thanks for coming on.